The evenings had become Daniel's quiet escape, soft orange light settling over the small countryside path he walked after work, the kind of hour where everything slowed down just enough for the heart to breathe. The breeze carried the scent of fading sunlight and grass, and the world felt simple again. But on one particular evening, he wasn't alone. A small dog waited by the bend in the path, sitting with an unusual stillness, ears lifted, eyes gentle, posture calm yet purposeful. Not fearful, not lost, just present. As if he had been expecting someone. Daniel paused, unsure why the sight tugged at him the way it did. The dog didn't bark or move, he simply tilted his head, giving a soft, knowing look that felt strangely comforting. When Daniel stepped forward, the dog rose slowly and walked a few steps beside him, never rushing, never intruding, matching his pace with quiet intention. The next evening, the dog was there again. Same place. Same calm presence. Same gentle spark in his eyes that made Daniel feel seen. Day after day, the routine continued. The dog would rise as Daniel approached, walk with him along the path, then return to his spot like a keeper of quiet rituals. And though they shared no words, something unspoken passed between them, something soothing, something healing. Yet there was always a moment, near the end of each walk, when the dog would pause and stare toward the hills with deep, emotional focus, as if sensing something Daniel could not yet understand. What the dog felt would change everything. Evening had become Daniel's sanctuary. A soft ritual. A place where the noise of life finally loosened its grip. Most days, he left work with a tired breath, but by the time he reached the countryside trail, the world felt different. Calmer. Warmer. Like the day was giving him one last gentle moment before letting go. The sky always shifted into the golden-orange glow he loved, the kind that stretched long shadows across the quiet path and made the grass shimmer with fading light. He walked slowly. Not because he needed to, but because his heart asked him to. He had been taking this path for months, ever since life had gotten a little heavier than usual, long hours, quiet evenings, a home that felt too still. The walk became his reset button. But on this particular evening, something changed. As he turned past the familiar bend, he saw a small dog sitting there. Not standing. Not wandering. Just waiting. Its posture was calm, almost thoughtful, ears gently perked, tail resting quietly on the ground. The dog wasn't afraid. Wasn't lost. It looked comfortable, as though this spot had always belonged to him. Daniel slowed. "Hey there," he whispered softly. The dog didn't bark. Didn't move. It simply lifted its head and met his eyes with a warm, steady gaze. There was something unusual about the way it looked at him, not with curiosity, but with recognition. Like it already knew him. Daniel felt a small warmth in his chest. He couldn't explain it. But he felt it. He took a step forward. The dog rose slowly, matching his movement with quiet grace, then walked beside him, just one or two steps behind, as if letting Daniel lead. No tugging. No rushing. Just a gentle, companion-like presence. They walked together for a minute or two. Daniel stealing glances, the dog keeping pace, the evening breeze moving softly around them. Eventually, the dog drifted slightly ahead, paused, and turned back with a soft tilt of the head as if checking on him. Daniel let out a small breath. A smile touched his face. "You're a friendly one, aren't you?" The dog blinked slowly, as though answering without sound. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No sudden excitement. No barking or jumping. Just calm companionship, the kind that feels real even without words. When Daniel reached the end of the path he usually walked, the dog slowed and stopped. No push to follow further. No hesitation. As if this was the natural point where their shared moment ended. Daniel crouched slightly. "Well, I guess this is where we split, huh?" The dog sat again, the same still, patient way it had when Daniel first saw it. A soft wind passed between them. Warm. Almost comforting. Daniel straightened and gave a quiet nod. "All right then, maybe I'll see you around." He turned to leave. But some small tug inside him, made him look back. The dog hadn't moved. It simply watched him walk away, calm and knowing, as if this gentle meeting meant something. Daniel walked home with a softer heart than he'd had all week. Still unsure why. Still wondering who the dog belonged to. Still thinking about that steady gaze. But he didn't overthink it. Not yet. He slept early that night, and for the first time in a while, he slept peacefully. The next evening, Daniel returned to the trail. Part of him didn't expect anything. But another part, a quiet, hopeful part, wondered. He reached the same bend. And there he was. The dog. Sitting exactly where he had the day before. Same posture. Same gentle, grounded presence. Daniel stopped. A soft smile formed without effort. You waited? The dog rose, tail giving one small, calm sweep across the ground. Not excitement, just acknowledgement. As Daniel stepped closer, the dog matched his pace again, walking beside him with that same unspoken purpose. Something inside Daniel shifted, a warm, grounding feeling he hadn't realized he'd been missing. This wasn't random. Wasn't coincidence. It was comfort. A quiet connection settling gently into his life on an ordinary evening. And though Daniel didn't know it yet, what the dog sensed would change everything. The next day, Daniel found himself leaving work a little earlier than usual. Not because he rushed, but because something inside him felt quietly pulled toward the evening trail. Like he didn't want to keep the dog waiting, even though he knew that sounded strange. Still, the thought warmed him. The light was softer today. More gold than orange. It washed over the countryside path like a warm blanket, and Daniel felt the shift in his shoulders as soon as his shoes touched the dirt. His breath loosened. His thoughts slowed. When he reached the familiar bend, he already felt a small flutter of anticipation, a feeling he hadn't felt since childhood. And there he was. The dog sat exactly as before. Calm. Still. Posture relaxed yet intentional, as if this place was his lookout spot, and Daniel was the one he had been waiting to see. Daniel stopped a few feet away. A soft chuckle escaped him. You really are here again, he murmured. The dog stood, gave a small, slow wag of the tail, not playful, not excited, just warm acknowledgement. A greeting that felt gentle and chosen. Daniel walked forward. The dog stepped beside him, matching his pace almost perfectly. No hesitation. No uncertainty. It felt as though they had been doing this for years. They walked together in comfortable silence. The path stretched ahead, painted in warm evening light. Grass swayed lazily in the breeze. Birds called softly from the trees. Daniel glanced down at the dog. You know, if someone saw us like this, they'd think we've been friends for a long time. The dog looked up briefly, a small flicker of connection, then continued walking, steady and calm. Daniel felt something ease inside his chest. A tension he didn't even realize had been there. For months, he'd been carrying quiet heaviness, long workdays, lonely evenings, a lingering sense of disconnect from the world. He never talked about it. He just kept going. But this small companionship, this simple walk with a waiting dog, felt like someone had gently taken part of the weight off his shoulders. They reached a stretch of path where the trees opened up, revealing rolling hills touched by fading sunlight. The dog slowed. Paused. Then looked toward the open land with a soft, focused expression. Daniel noticed. You see something? He asked quietly. The dog didn't move forward, just stared out, steady and thoughtful, as though sensing something only he understood. Daniel stayed beside him, letting the silence breathe. After a moment, the dog resumed walking, returning to their shared pace. But Daniel's curiosity grew a little more, a warm, gentle curiosity, not suspicion or worry. Just wonder. Halfway along the trail, Daniel spoke again, soft, almost contemplative. You know. I don't even know your name. The dog looked up with a calm blink, as if names weren't the important part. Daniel smiled. All right, maybe we'll figure that out later. The dog's ear twitched. A tiny, quiet response. Enough to make Daniel laugh under his breath. They walked until the light turned deeper, shifting from gold to a warm muted amber. Shadows stretched across the path like soft ribbons. When they reached the point where Daniel always ended his walk, the dog slowed again, the same as the day before. Almost like a ritual he understood better than Daniel. Daniel stopped and crouched, resting an elbow on his knee. "You don't follow past here, do you?" The dog sat, calm as always. There was something meaningful in that simple choice, as if the dog knew his place, his purpose, his boundary. "Well," Daniel whispered, "I'll see you tomorrow then, if you're still around." The dog held his gaze. Warm. Steady. Present. As Daniel began walking away, the dog didn't move, just watched him, almost the way someone watches a friend leave. Nothing clingy. Nothing urgent. Just quiet understanding. The moment lingered with Daniel long after he returned home. In his kitchen. While he reheated dinner. While he washed the dishes. Even when he sat on the couch, the house silent around him. He thought about the dog's stillness. The focus in those soft brown eyes. The way he matched Daniel's steps without ever being told. That night, Daniel found himself smiling for no reason. A small, steady warmth settled behind his ribs, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. A simple routine had formed. Unexpected. Unspoken. But comforting in a way he couldn't quite explain. Tomorrow, he knew he'd walk the trail again. Not just for peace. Not just for habit. But because a calm dog with quiet intuition would be waiting at the bend. And Daniel had begun to realize. This routine was becoming something he looked forward to. Something steady. Something special. Something he needed more than he knew. By the third evening, Daniel didn't just hope the dog would be there. He expected it quietly, humbly, the way someone expects the sun to slip into the horizon each night. The countryside path felt different now. Warmer. Like it had gained a new layer of meaning. The soft colors of dusk painted the trail with gentle golds and warm shadows, and Daniel's heart moved to that rhythm, slower, calmer. As he reached the familiar bend, he didn't even need to look ahead. He felt the dog's presence first, a gentle pull, a sense of someone waiting. And there he was. Sitting in the same spot, with the same calm posture, ears tilted forward as if tuned perfectly to the moment Daniel's footsteps arrived. Daniel breathed out a smile. "Hey, buddy. Good to see you again." The dog stood, tail lifting in that small, deliberate sweep, and walked toward him with a quiet confidence, not rushed, not hesitant, just sure. They began their walk, falling into an easy rhythm that felt more natural each day. But today, something was different. The dog wasn't just matching Daniel's pace, he was responding to him. Whenever Daniel slowed, the dog drew a little closer. Whenever Daniel sighed softly, the dog glanced up with those warm, intuitive eyes, as if checking in. And when Daniel picked up speed, the dog gently adjusted, never pulling ahead, never lagging. Daniel noticed. "You really pay attention, don't you?" he murmured. The dog blinked slow and soft, the way dogs sometimes do when they're offering comfort without touching you. Daniel kept walking, but something in his chest tightened, not painfully, just emotionally. He hadn't felt this kind of connection in years. Not this quiet kind. Not this understanding without words. As they passed a cluster of oak trees, the breeze shifted. Leaves rustled at a tender ripple, casting moving shadows across the path. The dog paused. Not abruptly, just with calm purpose. He stepped slightly ahead, then looked back at Daniel with a gentle, guiding expression. "You want to go this way?" Daniel asked. The dog didn't bark. He simply turned his head toward a small slope leading up the hill, a place Daniel had never walked before. Then he returned his gaze to Daniel as if patiently waiting for him to choose. Daniel hesitated. Not from fear, just surprise. "All right," he said softly. "Lead the way." But only for a bit. The dog moved forward, slow and steady. Not dragging Daniel, not straying far. Just guiding with intention. They walked up the gentle incline, the evening light glowing softly through the branches overhead. The air felt warmer here, quieter. Like the hill held onto the day a little longer than the rest of the land. Halfway up, the dog paused again. He stood still, ears forward, body relaxed yet focused. Daniel stepped beside him. "What is it?" he whispered. The dog looked out over the hillside, eyes soft, expression almost reflective. For a moment, Daniel just stood there with him. Letting the silence speak. Letting the wind carry whatever quiet story lived in that spot. It felt meaningful. Even though Daniel couldn't explain why. After a few breaths, the dog resumed their walk back down toward the main path. No insistence. No pressure. Just a gentle nudge toward discovery. Daniel followed, curiosity blooming quietly in his mind. When they returned to the familiar trail, the dog drifted closer to him, closer than usual. He brushed Daniel's leg lightly with his shoulder, then walked at his side as though sensing Daniel needed grounding. "You're something special," Daniel whispered. The dog's ear twitched. Another small, warm reply. They walked until the late sunlight dimmed into soft amber. Crickets began their evening song. The whole world felt like it was exhaling. As they neared the end point of their usual walk, Daniel slowed. "I don't really know what you're trying to show me," he said, voice gentle, almost vulnerable, "but I feel it. I really do." The dog sat beside him. Calm. Steady. Eyes holding that quiet, intuitive understanding. A long breath left Daniel's chest. "You know, I've been carrying a lot lately," he admitted softly. "I guess. I didn't realize how heavy things felt until you showed up." The dog looked up at him, head tilted slightly, as if absorbing every word. Daniel smiled a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for walking with me." The dog blinked again, slow and warm, as if accepting the gratitude. As always, when Daniel turned to head home, the dog remained in place. Watching. Present. Never following past that point. And as Daniel walked away, he felt something different tonight. Not just comfort. Not just routine. But the beginning of something deeper. A quiet connection with a dog who sensed emotions he never spoke aloud. A connection that seemed to be guiding him toward something important. Something he wasn't ready to name yet. But the dog already understood. By the fourth evening, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time, anticipation that was soft, calm, and strangely grounding. The kind of anticipation that grows from comfort, not excitement. Like looking forward to a quiet conversation with someone who understands you without needing details. He reached the path a little earlier than usual. The sun hadn't fully dipped yet, light spilled across the trail in warm golden sheets, catching on the tops of the tall grass and turning them into soft ribbons of color. The bend approached. And there he was. The dog sat exactly where he always did, calm, steady, present. As if the world made more sense from that spot only when Daniel walked into view. Daniel's breath softened. "Hey, buddy," he said quietly. "I missed you today." The dog stood with gentle purpose, a slow sweep of the tail acknowledging his arrival. Not energetic. Not needy. Just warm. They began walking together, falling into the familiar rhythm, Daniel's steady steps, the dog's soft pace beside him, the crickets beginning their early song in the grass. After a few minutes, Daniel spoke again, his voice carrying more vulnerability than he intended. "You know, I've been thinking about you all day." He chuckled under his breath. "That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?" The dog lifted his gaze, gave a small blink, not judging, not questioning, just listening. Daniel exhaled. "I guess it's just, you make things feel easier." "I don't know how, but you do." The dog walked a little closer, his shoulder gently brushing Daniel's leg, the smallest gesture, yet it carried more meaning than words. Daniel smiled softly. "That right there," he murmured, "that's what I'm talking about." They continued along the path, and Daniel began talking the way people do when they finally feel safe enough to speak. He didn't overshare. He didn't spill every detail. Just small pieces, small truths that had been sitting quietly inside him. "It's been a rough year," he said. "Work's been a lot. And home feels empty these days." The dog listened, not by stopping, not by staring, but by walking alongside him with that same calm, intuitive presence. Sometimes the dog would glance up, matching Daniel's tone with a gentle, empathetic gaze that made Daniel feel heard. Sometimes the dog stayed quiet and focused ahead, giving Daniel space to breathe between his thoughts. And sometimes, every few minutes, the dog would pause near a patch of wildflowers, or a small rise in the trail, or a spot where the wind carried a sweeter scent, as if guiding Daniel to slow down and feel the world around him. Daniel noticed. "You always know when to pause," he whispered. "Like you're saying, take a moment, it's okay." The dog tilted his head, offering a peaceful silence in response. They walked until the sky shifted from gold to warm amber. The horizon softened. Birds settled into the treetops with quiet fluttering. As they reached a section where the path curved toward the hillside, the dog suddenly drifted a few steps ahead, not to lead, but to invite. He stopped at a small clearing of grass lit gently by the last rays of daylight. Then he turned, meeting Daniel's eyes as if saying, "Come sit." Daniel hesitated, then stepped into the clearing. The air felt different here, warmer, softer, almost like the hill held a memory. Daniel sat on a smooth patch of grass. The dog lay down beside him, body close enough to feel comforting but not pressing. Together they watched the sky fade. Daniel breathed deeply, letting the moment sink in. "You know," he said quietly, "I haven't just sat like this for a long time. Feels like the world always pushes me to keep moving." The dog rested his head on his paws, eyes half closed, ears relaxed, content simply to be beside him. Daniel continued, his voice slower now, gentle. "You're good company, better than most people, honestly." The dog's tail moved once, a soft, quiet sweep. Daniel laughed softly. "Yeah. I figured you'd agree." The breeze shifted, bringing a faint earthy scent from the hillside. Crickets hummed a soft rhythm. The last light of day rested on Daniel's shoulders like a warm hand. A quiet peace filled his chest. He didn't know why this dog chose him. He didn't know why the routine felt so natural. But he knew one thing. He wasn't alone anymore. Not in the way he had been. Not in the quiet corners of his evenings. Eventually, the dog rose, stepped forward a few paces, then turned, a familiar look now. A look that meant the walk continues. Daniel stood and followed. They walked until the end of the trail. The moment they reached Daniel's usual stopping point, the dog halted again. Always the same boundary. Always the same stillness. Daniel crouched. "Thank you," he whispered. "For today. For everything." The dog held his gaze, calm, warm, understanding. Daniel began walking away, the dog remaining exactly where he always did. And as he left the trail, Daniel realized something. This wasn't just routine anymore. It was connection. It was trust. It was the beginning of something quietly life-changing. And the dog seemed to know it long before he did. By the fifth evening, Daniel no longer questioned why he came to the trail. It wasn't just habit now. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper, a pull toward a quiet connection that had become the softest part of his day. The sky was painted in muted pastels tonight, lavender, rose, pale gold blending at the edges, the kind of sky that felt like a gentle pause between the noise of daylight and the quiet of night. As Daniel approached the bend, he already felt the warm, familiar comfort rising in him. And there, as always, the dog sat waiting. But today, something in his posture looked slightly different. He wasn't just sitting. He was facing a little more toward the hills, as if expecting Daniel, but also listening for something else. Daniel smiled softly. "Evening, buddy," he said. "Hope you didn't wait too long." The dog rose with calm purpose, tail giving that slow, thoughtful wag that had become their greeting. But instead of falling into step immediately, the dog took a few steps toward the hillside path, the one he had guided Daniel toward before. Then he stopped. Looked back. waited. Daniel noticed the difference immediately. You want to go up there again? The dog didn't move, but his gaze held that quiet, intuitive intention, not urging, not demanding, just inviting. Daniel took a breath. All right, lead the way. They began walking up the gentle slope. The evening breeze brushed softly past them, carrying the scent of earth and faint wildflowers. Birds called from the trees in low, settling tones. The world felt warmer here, more intimate. As they reached the clearing, Daniel paused. The dog didn't sit this time. He walked a few steps farther than usual, just a few, to a small patch of ground touched by the last bit of sunlight. Then he looked at Daniel with a soft, meaningful stillness. Daniel stepped closer, curiosity warming into something more tender. What is it about this place? He whispered. The dog lowered his head gently, sniffing the ground, then sat beside it, calm, steady, reverent. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not fear. Not worry. Just emotion he couldn't yet name. He crouched beside the dog. You've brought me here twice now. This spot means something to you, doesn't it? The dog gave a slow blink, then leaned gently against Daniel's leg, a gesture so soft it felt like shared breathing. Daniel placed a hand on the dog's back, running his fingers slowly through the warm fur. We don't have to rush it, he murmured. I'm here. Whatever this place is to you. I'll understand when you're ready. The dog exhaled a quiet breath, almost like relief, and rested his head against Daniel's knee for a moment before lifting it again to face the hillside. Together, they watched the sky shift into deeper hues of evening. After a minute, the dog stood and gently nudged Daniel's arm, not to guide him somewhere else, but to continue their usual walk. Daniel stood slowly, heart softer than before. They walked back toward the main trail, the dog staying closer than usual, his shoulder brushing Daniel's leg every few steps. Daniel spoke quietly as they walked. You know, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. About how you always seem to know what I'm feeling. The dog lifted his gaze with gentle awareness. Daniel continued, voice low and warm. Most days, I just go through things alone. Not because I wanted it, just because that's how life ends up sometimes. He paused, letting the evening settle around them. But with you, I don't feel that way. Not even a little. The dog slowed, matching the emotional weight in Daniel's tone. And that spot up there, Daniel exhaled softly. I don't know what it is. But it feels important. To you. And, maybe soon, to me too. The dog touched his nose lightly to Daniel's hand, a quiet promise, a gentle acknowledgement. As they continued walking, the soft mystery wrapped around them again, not heavy, not unsettling, just warm and meaningful, like a story unfolding at its own natural pace. When they reached the end of the trail, the dog stopped at the familiar point. Always the same place. Always the same quiet decision. Daniel crouched down. Thank you, he said softly, for showing me something new today. The dog's tail moved once, a warm acceptance. Daniel smiled gently. I'll follow your lead, whenever you're ready to tell me the rest. He stood and took a few steps toward the exit of the trail. When he turned back, the dog was sitting, watching him with soft, steady eyes. Like always. Like ritual. Like trust. Daniel walked home with a different kind of quiet tonight. Not loneliness. Not emptiness. A quiet filled with anticipation, a gentle knowing that the dog's whisper of a mystery was guiding him towards something meaningful. Something beautiful waiting just beyond the edge of understanding. And tomorrow, he would be ready to follow again. By the sixth evening, Daniel felt a quiet nervousness beneath his anticipation. Not fear. Not worry. Just the sense that something meaningful was getting closer, like the story behind this gentle dog was finally beginning to show its edges. The evening felt unusually still. The breeze lighter. The colors softer. The entire trail seemed to be holding its breath. As Daniel approached the bend, the dog was waiting, but today, he wasn't sitting. He was standing. Alert. Focused. Not tense, just aware. Daniel slowed. "Hey, you okay?" he murmured softly. The dog stepped toward him immediately, tail giving one slow sweep, but his eyes drifted back toward the hillside, the same place he had been guiding Daniel toward. "Do you want to go up?" Daniel asked. The dog didn't leave this time. He simply walked beside Daniel, closer than usual, as if asking him to join rather than follow. They moved toward the slope. The light was dimmer tonight, the sun slipping behind a band of gentle clouds, casting a muted glow over the hillside. As they reached the clearing, the dog walked a little ahead, not rushing, not pulling, but purposeful. He stopped at the same patch of ground as before. Then sat. Slowly. Deliberately. Daniel felt a small ache form in his chest, a soft heaviness, like a memory trying to surface. He crouched beside the dog. "Okay," he whispered. "I'm here. Show me what you're trying to say." The dog lowered his head, sniffing the ground gently again, the same gesture as last time, but today, he didn't stop there. He lifted his gaze toward the trees beyond the clearing, toward a small, worn wooden bench tucked half hidden in the brush. Daniel blinked. "I never noticed that." The bench looked old, weathered by years of sun and rain. A bit uneven. A bit forgotten. But still standing. The dog walked toward it with slow, steady steps. Daniel followed, something warm and fragile stirring inside him. As the dog reached the bench, he sat again right at the foot of it, like a guardian of a memory. Daniel touched the backrest. The wood felt smooth in spots from long use. "Someone used to sit here," he murmured. The dog looked up at him, eyes soft, deep, emotional. Daniel understood something then. Not the full story, but enough to feel its weight. He sat on the bench slowly, as if entering a moment that didn't belong solely to him. The dog rested beside his leg, leaning in gently, like he had done this before, long before Daniel ever arrived on this path. Daniel exhaled, voice quiet. Was this someone's favorite place? The dog gave a small blink, the kind that felt like yes. Daniel placed a hand on the dog's back, feeling the warmth beneath his palm. "Is that why you come here?" He swallowed softly. "You're remembering someone?" The dog didn't answer, but the silence felt like an answer. Daniel leaned back. A slow breath left his chest. The world around them felt fuller, as if the bench held moments, stories, laughs, quiet evenings shared between a person and a dog who once loved them. Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For whoever you're missing." The dog pressed gently against his knee, a soft nudge, as if comforting him instead. Daniel let out a shaky breath. "You're still coming here, still waiting, still keeping the routine." The dog's gaze held steady. Loyal. Faithful. Enduring. Daniel's heart tightened. "You're not here by accident," he said quietly. "You've been doing this for a long time, haven't you?" The dog lowered his head, resting it on Daniel's foot for a brief moment, a gesture full of trust and something deeper. Then he looked back toward the clearing, toward the path Daniel always walked, as if saying, "I waited. And now you're here too." Daniel's voice softened further. "You didn't bring me up here just for me, did you? You brought me here because you needed someone to understand." The dog leaned against him again. A quiet agreement. And in that moment, Daniel felt something shift, a connection forming not just from companionship, but from shared emotion. Shared loss. Shared need. He spoke in a whisper. "You don't have to wait alone anymore." The dog closed his eyes briefly, a small, peaceful expression passing over him. The light dimmed further, the sky settling into a soft dusky blue. The crickets began their night chorus, and the hillside felt sacred, wrapped in a warmth deeper than daylight. Eventually, the dog stood and nudged Daniel's arm lightly. Time to walk. Time to return to routine. Daniel stood slowly. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'm with you." They descended the slope together. The dog stayed closer than ever, his presence warm, grounding, almost protective. When they reached the end of the trail, the dog stopped at the usual boundary. Daniel crouched. "I think I'm starting to understand," he whispered. "And whatever the rest of the story is, I'm ready." The dog held his gaze, soft and steady. And for the first time, Daniel felt certain. The truth the dog was leading him toward wasn't just sad. It wasn't heavy. It was beautiful. Deeply beautiful. A truth born from loyalty and quiet, enduring love. A truth he would learn soon. The seventh evening arrived with a softness Daniel couldn't ignore. The sky was brushed with muted peach and pale lavender, and the whole trail felt unusually quiet, as if it knew something important was about to unfold. Daniel walked slower today, his heart carrying a gentle heaviness mixed with anticipation. He didn't know the full story yet, but he felt close enough that each step felt meaningful. As he neared the familiar bend, the dog was waiting, but not in his usual spot. Tonight, he stood a few steps farther up the path, facing the hillside, as if guiding Daniel even before he arrived. Daniel's breath softened. "Okay, buddy," he whispered. "I'm right behind you." The dog approached him briefly, tail giving one warm, deliberate sweep, then turned toward the hill with quiet assurance. They walked together up the slope, the dog staying close, his pace gentle, his presence grounding. When they reached the clearing, the dog didn't stop. He continued forward, toward the old wooden bench. Daniel's heart tightened. "You want me to see something," he murmured. The dog paused at the bench, placing one paw gently against the wood, a soft, reverent gesture. Daniel stepped closer. The bench looked older than he'd realized. Weather-worn, edges smoothed by years of use, wood faded by sunlight and rain. But something else caught his eye, something carved faintly into the upper slat. Words worn down, but still readable. Daniel leaned in. It was a name. Just a first name. Marie. A simple carving. Gentle. Personal. The dog sat beside the bench, not facing Daniel, but facing the name. Daniel knelt slowly. "Was she your person?" he whispered. The dog lowered his head. Not in grief. Not in pain. But in remembrance, a soft, loyal memory held gently in his heart. Daniel felt his chest warm with emotion. "And this was her spot," he said quietly. "This is where she sat with you." A faint breeze brushed past them, carrying a tender hush across the clearing as if the hill itself acknowledged the truth. Daniel sat on the bench, carefully, respectfully, feeling the weight of the moment settle around him. The dog rested at his feet, leaning gently against his leg like he had done countless times before. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting everything settle. "She must have loved you a lot," he whispered. "To make you come back here every day, to keep waiting, to keep this routine alive." The dog didn't move. He simply breathed softly, shoulders rising and falling with a peaceful steadiness. Daniel continued, voice warm and low. "And when she couldn't come anymore, you still came. Because that's what loyalty looks like, right?" The dog's tail moved once, the gentlest sweep, filled with quiet agreement. Daniel swallowed against the emotion building in his chest. "You weren't waiting for her to return, you were honoring her. Keeping the routine alive. Keeping her memory warm." The realization wrapped around Daniel with a tenderness that ached. The dog nudged Daniel's hand, as if acknowledging the understanding between them. Daniel let out a soft, shaky breath. "And then I came along." The dog looked up at him, eyes deep with meaning. "You weren't confused," Daniel said softly. "You were lost. You were choosing me." The dog exhaled a gentle huff, a warm, quiet affirmation. Daniel's eyes softened. "You saw something in me, didn't you? Something familiar. Something that needed this place, just as much as you." The dog rested his head lightly on Daniel's knee, a gesture filled with trust, acceptance, and something resembling relief. For a long moment, they sat together in the quiet clearing, man and dog, sharing a memory that wasn't originally Daniel's, but had now become his too. Daniel spoke again, voice so soft it almost blended with the breeze. "She meant everything to you. And now, this routine you kept for her, you're sharing it with me." The dog blinked slowly, a peaceful expression warming his features. Daniel placed a gentle hand on the dog's back. "I'm honored," he whispered. "Truly." The dog responded by leaning in, not out of need, but out of connection. Daniel glanced at the name carved into the bench. Marie. Whoever she had been, she had clearly loved this dog deeply. And that love had lived on in the quiet ritual the dog refused to let fade. "You weren't waiting for someone to return," Daniel murmured. "You were waiting for someone who understood." The hillside felt warmer then. Softer. Like the memory of Marie had settled around them both with gentle acceptance. Eventually, the dog rose, nudging Daniel's arm lightly. "Time to walk. Time to return to routine." Daniel stood slowly. "I get it now," he said. "And I'm here. For as long as you want me." The dog's tail moved once, a peaceful, grateful sweep. As they descended the hill together, Daniel felt something shift inside him, a healing he hadn't expected, a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he was missing. The dog wasn't alone anymore. And neither was he. A beautiful truth had been revealed, one born from loyalty, love, and the quiet ways memories stay alive. Tomorrow, the routine would continue. But now, Daniel walked it with full understanding. The story wasn't just the dog's anymore. It had become theirs. The eighth evening arrived with a quiet clarity, the kind that settles into the heart when understanding has finally found its place. Daniel walked the path slowly, no longer searching, no longer questioning, but carrying a warm readiness inside him. The sky glowed with soft evening color, peach fading into lavender, gold dipping into the edges of the horizon. The world looked calm, like it was gently closing the day with a peaceful sigh. And there he was. The dog waited at the bend, the same spot where this entire story began, but tonight, the moment felt fuller. Richer. Shared. Daniel felt his chest warm. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "I understand now." The dog rose with soft grace, tail moving once in a warm, slow arc, not greeting out of habit, but out of connection. They began their walk, but tonight the rhythm felt different. It wasn't discovery anymore. It wasn't mystery. It was companionship, steady, mutual, and deeply comforting. Daniel walked with his hands in his pockets, breathing in the quiet evening air. "You know," he said softly, "I didn't realize how much I needed this routine until you made it a part of my life." The dog glanced up at him, eyes warm, steady, understanding. Daniel smiled gently. "You kept Marie's memory alive, and now you've given me a place to breathe. A place to feel again." The dog brushed his shoulder lightly against Daniel's leg, a small gesture, but full of meaning. They reached the point where the path stretched wide and the sky opened above them. Instead of continuing straight, the dog gave a gentle nudge toward the hillside. Daniel nodded. "Let's go," he whispered. They climbed the familiar slope, the dog matching Daniel's pace, not leading, not following, but walking beside him as equals in the moment. At the clearing, the dog paused. Daniel paused with him. The air felt warmer here, as if Marie's presence lingered in the soft glow of the fading sunlight. The dog approached the bench, rested his paw gently against the same wooden slat with the carved name. Daniel inhaled slowly. Then he sat down beside the carving with a reverence he hadn't felt before. The dog curled beside his feet, settling his body close, then resting his head against the side of the bench like he had done countless times with the person he once loved. Daniel watched him quietly, heart full. "You kept your promise," he whispered. "You came here every day." The dog's eyes softened, not with sadness, but with peaceful remembrance. Daniel lowered a hand to the dog's back, slow, gentle strokes that carried gratitude rather than comfort. "You didn't lose her," he said softly. "You honored her. And you kept her routine alive until someone else could understand it with you." The dog leaned into his touch, breathing in a slow, peaceful rhythm. Daniel looked out over the hillside, the warm colors fading, the crickets beginning their evening song, the world feeling both quiet and full. "I can sit here with you," he murmured. "Not because you need me to, but because I want to." The dog gave the smallest wag, a soft, grateful sweep. Daniel continued, voice low. "You can share this spot now. You don't have to hold it alone." The dog exhaled, a gentle release, as if letting go of years of quiet waiting. They stayed on the bench for a long while, watching the light dim into soft dusk. Neither spoke, not in words, but their breaths matched, their presence steady, their connection fully formed. Eventually, the dog rose and nudged Daniel's arm lightly, the familiar cue that it was time to finish the walk. Daniel stood with him, but instead of following the dog's lead down the hill, he stepped forward and walked beside him. "My turn to walk with you," he said softly. The dog's ears lifted a warm acknowledgement, and they moved together toward the main trail. When they reached the bottom, the world was washed in cool twilight. A soft blue glow covered the path. They walked to the end of the trail, the place where the dog always stopped, where he honored his boundary, where he watched Daniel leave every night. But tonight, the dog didn't sit immediately. He looked up at Daniel, eyes glowing gently in the dim light. Daniel crouched. "You don't have to stay here anymore," he whispered. "If you want to come with me, my home is yours." The dog held his gaze a long, warm moment, then stepped forward and rested his head against Daniel's shoulder. Daniel closed his eyes, emotion rising softly. "Okay," he whispered, "I'd love that." The dog didn't follow out of need. He followed out of trust. Out of understanding. Out of shared comfort. They walked off the trail together, side by side, leaving behind not the memory of Marie, but the loneliness that followed her absence. The routine wasn't ending. It was beginning again, new, shared, beautiful. And the dog, who had waited so faithfully, finally walked home with someone who understood his heart.